Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Earthly Lights podcast. This week's guest is one of my best friends and true inspiration, Grace Ogden. Grace is a midwife, and we talk about the ups and downs of such a vital job within the NHS and how she manages life-making decisions and the stress, but also the beauty that comes along with it. Grace was a little bit nervous before recording, but I think you all agree she was fantastic. At least I thought so. So sit back and enjoy the sweet, dulcet tones of the Lincolnshire accent. Without further ado, here is Grace Lucy Ogden, or Gracie, as I prefer to call her. How's work going? How's it been?
All right, to be honest. We had a very quiet April, which we were all trying to work out why is it so quiet, why are we having a lull? But I think looking back, it was 9 months on from July, August. So whether because people were actually going back out, were less bored, they weren't just stuck in making babies.
Do you have peaks? In midwifery, do you have peak months where you just know you're going to get a windfall of babies coming?
September's always busy.
So what's that? Does that mean that's New Year baby?
That's Christmas.
Christmas, New Year babies.
Yes,
right.
September's often busy. But it's weird, you can come to work one day and it's full, it's crazy, it's really busy, everyone's running around, and then you can come back 2 days later and it's how has this happened? Because it's really quiet.
Yeah.
Weird. But we do get general peaks and troughs, but April was really quiet. But we knew it was going to be quiet because you can tell from when women obviously come for their booking appointments, you work out the stats. So if 300 women come for a booking appointment in 1 week, and then the next month there's only 50 women come for a booking appointment, you know that you're going to have a quiet month in 9 months' time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's mad that.
So you kind of know what's coming normally, but we're getting a bit of a busy month again, which we've expected, but it's okay.
And how, I suppose I start right at the beginning. Why is it that you wanted to be a midwife? This is what I don't get. For people who might be listening, Grace, I've known Grace since secondary school, and
too long.
But correct me back when I had a hairline. But correct me if I'm wrong. But you wanted to be a midwife since year 12, or maybe even before that. I knew you from year 12. Did you want to be a midwife before then?
I don't think so. I don't think I woke up one day and thought I need to be a midwife, but I think I always wanted to do something that was fulfilling.
Yeah.
But I never really knew what, and I don't know. It just fascinated me. I always kind of wanted to do something that was helping people in some way, but I don't know. I can't explain it, but I just really wanted to do it.
Did it come from your mum? Because your mum works in the NHS as well.
No, because my mum's non-clinical, so she's always worked. She's worked in the NHS for 30 years, but not clinically. She's not a nurse or anything. She's works in IT.
Right.
So not really. It wasn't even that. So I can't put my finger on it really. I don't know what it was, but I think once, because obviously midwifery is such a competitive course to get onto at uni. I don't know. I think you work so hard to actually apply that if you didn't really want to do it, you just wouldn't bother.
Yeah.
And if you didn't really want to do it, then you wouldn't get through the process. Either A, you wouldn't get in to uni, and B, you wouldn't make it through the course. So by the time you actually get to the point of being a midwife, there's only a select few. Well, not a select few. I feel like there's only the people left that really kind of want to do it, because you have to work so hard to do it.
Yeah.
The same with nursing and medicine, I suppose.
Yeah, but the thing is, with you, because you obviously had to redo year 12, and that was when I was this is this is serious. She hasn't just done thought of this on a whim, or I want to be a midwife, and then when it didn't come off, you're oh fuck it, I'll just study English or some shit. Do you know what I mean? You were and that meant you had to take back a year. Obviously you were with Tesh, but really you weren't. Do you know what I mean? For me, that felt like such a big decision on your part. I massively respected you for doing that, but do you understand why people like me and maybe the more cynical or more selfish people of society, who, if we do a job, we probably just do it for our own gain, for money or whatever the case may be, or for prestige, like why we respect people like you so much. Like, do you get that, or because you are who you are, you just kind of feel like it's normal?
I completely get where you're coming from, but because I think I work with so many people who are in the same boat, it does just become your normal.
Yeah.
I see where you're coming from. Yeah, I do get what you're saying, but I think because I'm so used to working with people who are the same, and like doctors, healthcare assistants, nurses, like they're all very similar in doing what they do. So I don't know. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I feel like I feel like those types of positions, the majority of the public like massively overlook them until one of two things happen. Either they're like in need, like all of a sudden they get ill, or do you know what I mean? Or all of a sudden the house is on fire and the firemen come around and like put it out and this, that, and the other. And they're actually like, you actually get to witness firsthand like what these people do for like society. Or if you're lucky, you don't have to go through that, but you have like people who are close to you who are in those professions anyway, and just by like talking to them and like hearing their types of stories, you realize like how important they are. And obviously, like
Mm.
obviously with COVID, it got massively. Obviously, you guys got all the props that you've been needing and deserved for since way back when, and probably not enough, to be honest, because I feel like the clap was the absolute bare minimum you guys deserved. But like it's just mental to me how you guys, like, to me I always think of it as like you guys have a calling, like it's something. Like with me, I was like, oh, I'm good at Spanish, I'm fairly clever, I can do these types of jobs which will get me like this type of money and blah blah blah, and that will help set me up. And do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Whereas
yeah,
like with you and like all of obviously like Lizzie and like Lily and like obviously your uni mates who all did like some sort of nursing course at uni,
mm,
like you would just tell me like some of the like, to me anyway, what felt like the worst stories, like when you're on placement and stuff. And I'm
yeah,
just thinking like, oh my god, these girls are paying for this, number one.
yeah.
And then like they're like getting these like I think Lily said like one time, because she works with children, doesn't she, like where they would like fling shit at
Oh,
her and stuff
Layla.
like this. Layla, sorry, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And all of this stuff, and I'm thinking, and like that was on the daily for her, like that wasn't like a one-off like bad episode. She was like, oh yeah, that's just like, do you know what I mean, I kind of come to
Yeah,
expect that when I go into work. And I'm like,
yeah,
I'm trying to imagine how you can have that, like that frame of mind where you expect it, but then it doesn't turn you sour, like it
yeah,
doesn't turn you into like a horrible type person or like a
yeah,
cold person. And to me that's just like, I respect it so much because it's something that I could never do.
yeah. I think though, like for every I think because you don't do it, you kind of see like the gory side, because you don't get to see like the nice side of it as well. Whereas I think
Yeah, yeah.
for every shit hard part of the job,
Mm-hmm.
there is amazing parts, and it's not like we're completely like altruistic. We do it all for everybody else. Like it does make us feel good as well. Like
Yeah.
especially midwifery, like it's so rewarding when people say thank you and they appreciate what you've done, and you see them at the end of this amazing journey and they've got a baby in their arms, and it's it's amazing to help people, but it's rewarding for us as well. So especially midwifery, I do think it is hard, and there are times when you think, oh my god, why do I do this to myself? But I'd say 9 times out of 10 it's because it makes us feel good and we love it. So especially nursing, I can't speak for, so I'm a bit like you. Like I couldn't be a nurse. When like I just think nursing is so difficult to see people that are poorly every day.
Mm.
But yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Do those like high points, do they like bring you through, like when you're going through like a kind of a rough patch, or maybe there's like a patient or something's gone wrong, and do you know what I mean, it's just been a real terrible day,
Yeah.
like do you like actively and like consciously like have to almost like remind yourself of like, well, I have like do you know what I mean, and maybe
Yeah.
you've had like a load of good points yesterday or the day before that, and you can like, is that what helps bring you through those like, real
Um,
hard points?
I feel like midwifery is like a constant up and down. Like you'll have a really busy shift and you'll feel like you've been completely overworked and you're understaffed and you've not had a break in 13 hours. And those days are really hard, but then you'll come to work in 2 days' time, you've had a good night's sleep, you have time to reflect, you have time to get yourself together and you just go again and you just get back on the horse, and then that day won't be as bad, and then you'll have a really lovely delivery and you'll meet a lovely couple and you'll do something and you feel like you've given really good care. And it just, I don't think it's a conscious decision. I think maybe when I first started, but potentially you kind of do kind of reflect on things more and think about it. But when I feel like, because I've been doing it, I've been qualified for nearly 3 years now.
Yeah.
It's just routine. It's just normal that you understand that you're going to have your good days and your bad days. And I think, subconsciously, that is what keeps you going. But there's more good days than bad days. And especially with, like, I work with such a lovely team. Like, even when it's like really hard days, everyone's not had a break and it's busy and the unit's manic, but everyone supports each other, even if you just to see each other in the corridor and have a quick chat and a quick laugh and a quick hug to get through it. Like, you just get yourselves through. And I can't describe it. It's weird. I think that's the same for anyone that works in the NHS as well, I think, because it can be so, you feel like you're on the limit sometimes. You feel like you're on the edge when you're under that much pressure. But then it just gets better, and then you just keep going. It's weird.
This is the thing. Like, when I talk to people like you, and obviously like me and you, like, we're good mates and we call each other fairly often and whatever else. And when I talk to you, like, and this is not to make you feel bad. This is like props to you, but I feel like such a shit bag afterwards because I'm thinking like, okay, so I'll have
what you do. When I came to Spain and you start speaking in Spanish, and then
but that's easy. Yeah, but the speaking in Spanish. No, but the speaking in Spanish, that's not pressure. But like, for example, if I like work, like if I have a long work day, so like I'm supposed to work 9 till 7 with a 2-hour lunch break, by the way. But like, let's say like
jammy guy, a 2-hour lunch break.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Wow. But if I work like, let's say for example, clients call like is last minute whatever, and I'm having to work till like 8:30, whatever. Yeah, so that would mean I've worked, let's say, 9 hours that day. I'll be like, oh, fuck's sake, like what? Honestly, what pain in the ass! Like this is out of order. Like I shouldn't be doing these over hours. Like blah blah blah. And then there's you working 13, and then not just that, but then also like pressure. Like for me, pressure is like, okay, the campaign has to go well. I have to reach targets. The money has to be correct. Blah blah. Which there's a certain level of pressure there because if I fuck up, like I can get the sack. But when I compare it to your level of pressure is like life or death. Like, and that's not hyperbole. Like, it is life or death. And then I feel like, Jesus Christ, like I'm worrying about like if a campaign like delivers on this target, and you're worrying about like a stillbirth. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just puts things into perspective, I think.
But we need not everyone can do these jobs. We need people to do the other jobs. And Jesus Christ, if I was in your job, I'd probably have a mental breakdown because I wouldn't have a clue what I'm doing. I feel like it's all relative. Like every job is stressful and no job is perfect. And I know that because I've worked in a petrol station and my God, I had stressful days there. So do you know what I mean? It's not like because you work in healthcare, you have the hardest job in the world. I think every job is hard and every job is stressful, and every job you have your good days and your bad days, don't you?
Can I ask you something? I'll ask you something then. When everyone starts their job, like, so when you leave uni and you start on your like fledgling career, whatever that may be, like your first job and your first like couple of months in that job, like everyone's a bit scared because you don't really like, even though you've come out of uni and you might have come out with like a great degree and stuff, like you don't really have any clue what you're doing. It's all new. You're like the lowest of the low, like, and this, that, and the other, right? And I'm like, it's scary for everyone. But I can't imagine what it's like coming out of uni. And I know you have placements in uni and stuff, so like it kind of gears you up for it. But I can't imagine what it's like to be like, right, I'm coming out of uni and now it's like, now you're a midwife. Like now you are responsible, obviously with your team as well, but you are responsible for like this fledgling life that's going to come in, and that's on you. Like, how do you even, like, when you started out, how did you compute that?
I can't explain to you how hard it was, to be honest. I think when I was training, people say to you like the first year after you qualify is going to be like one of the hardest years of your life, and they compare it to, you know, like when you learned how to drive.
Yeah,
you were like me, weren't you? You passed the time.
I know to rub it in, but yeah.
So it's like you can learn to drive, you can have all the driving lessons in the world, but until you're actually in that car without anyone telling you what to do, as somebody who's allowed to be on the roads on your own, like it's terrifying, but it is hard. I'm not gonna lie, it was scary, but you just get through it. Like, I found, you leave work, you've done one more shift, and you think, right, I've done it. Like, that's one more shift where I've had more experience, I'm learning more things, I'm getting better, I know where more things are. Because a lot of people will stay in the places where they've trained, but for me, I moved to a different trust. So what a lot of people don't know, like with the NHS, is that every single trust has like different guidelines, has different like processes, they use different like systems. So the IT systems where we document women's maternity records and women's maternity notes, etc. It's all completely different depending on the area and the trust that you're working in the NHS. So a lot of the things were different for me from where I trained when I started. So that was an extra kind of barrier as well. But
Yeah.
it was hard. It was really hard. But every day you get better. And I suppose it's like any job, isn't it? Like, you look back after you've been there for a year or two, and you look back to when you started and you think, Jesus Christ, I literally knew nothing.
How does it work with
But
like
not that you do,
mistakes?
you are prepared. But you obviously do know stuff. You don't know nothing, but you look back and you think the amount that you take in, you're like a sponge. You just take everything in, and you just
Yeah. Well, it's because like in everything, like, I feel like there's a real, and this is just in everything in life, but I feel like there's a real difference between like knowing something because you've read it from a book, and then like learning like the real world scenario for what you've
yeah,
perceived to have learned in a book.
yeah,
Like so you said to me for speaking in Spanish, like, yeah, I came out of uni and I had a good degree in Spanish and this, that, and the other. And then I moved over to Spain and I was like, oh, nice one. I've waited
yeah,
4 fucking
yeah,
years. Like all of this stuff that I was getting taught at like uni, like
yeah,
it's not coming in handy now. Like I need to like relearn all of this stuff that I thought I'd learned well. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah,
that's easy compared to like what you're doing. And I wanted to know, like, because everyone, I mean, just in my experience, I learned like through mistakes, either like my own personal mistakes or like mistakes of someone in a team, which is always
yeah,
best. Then they cop for it, and then you can just be like, right, don't do that again. But
yeah.
like, how the hell does that work in like a midwifery team?
Um,
Like,
I
what
think
happens when a mistake happens?
so. Obviously, there's like little mistakes which are to be expected, but I think because you are in a situation where you have so much responsibility, when you're newly qualified, you just ask, and you're encouraged to ask everything.
Right.
So when we have like newly qualified midwives come through, we always say to them, like, please do not be scared to ask. We'd be more worried about somebody who doesn't ask,
Yeah.
because there's no stupid questions. And even if somebody asks you a question, you think you probably should have known that, but at least you've asked, and now you know for sure, rather than doing something and then getting it wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are always kind of situations where you make small mistakes, then you learn from them. But because we are so encouraged to ask questions, you're not made to feel stupid. You do just ask lots of little things. Like, I remember,
Right.
so obviously as a midwife, we can give medication. I remember giving my first like dose of paracetamol. I asked another midwife to come with me, and she looked at me like I had two heads. Like, you don't need me to come with you. But I was just like, have I got this responsibility?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is hard, and you do. Obviously, we do have bigger mistakes happen sometimes, but I do think, as a lot of the culture is, when the mistakes happen, we look back on the kind of process and like the system rather than the individual error, which
Mm-hmm.
is quite good. You're not kind of made to feel like you're massively at fault.
Mm.
Obviously, you take responsibility for what's happened, but also they look at kind of like staffing, the system errors, kind of whether there's any processes that we can improve on to help make sure things like that don't happen again. So
Mm.
obviously you shit yourself because you want to do the best job you can do, and you never want to make a mistake. But yeah, you just get through it, and you just ask as many questions as you feel like you need to ask. And even now, midwives that have been qualified for 30 years will still ask people questions, because it's just a minefield. Like, you're never going to know everything, and everything changes so quickly because there's new evidence that comes out and guidelines change, and we as a population are changing, so we're coming across new problems. And different conditions are becoming more kind of common. So things change so quickly and we're never going to know everything. So mistakes are always going to happen. Like, you're never not going to get mistakes, especially in healthcare when human error is a massive thing. But I think it's all about kind of recognizing your own limitations, asking questions, reflecting, and just trying to improve yourself all the time, really, and not trying to beat yourself up if you do make those small mistakes, because at the end of the day, everybody's been in that position when you first start, because you can't know everything. It's impossible. And
But
as a
this is the
student,
thing.
you have 3 years to soak in as much information as you possibly can. And with all the best will in the world, however amazingly we try to prepare our students for being qualified midwives, in those 3 years, you're not going to come across every single eventuality in every single situation. So you are going to be exposed to new situations where you need to ask for help and potentially might make mistakes. But yeah, I think we are encouraged to be as safe as we can and ask questions and seek help if we need it.
I do feel sorry for for medical practitioners in general, because when they make a mistake, like, the general public are so quick to like call them out on it. Like, I've had it before, like when a doctor, I thought I had glandular fever, the doctor was like, nah, you've got a flu, blah blah, like sent me home.
You were so ill then.
Oh, so ill, mate. And like, he just sent me home. Was like,
I've so quiet. I thought,
honestly, also skinny. And and he sent me home to eat like Heinz soup, and I was like, mate, Heinz soup is not going to cure this. Like, I am fucked. And then he like,
all around though for a barbecue, didn't you? Bless you.
yeah, mate, I had to do that. But do you know what I mean? Then I had to then I was like insisting. I was like, 2 days later, I was like, I'm not getting better. Like, please just take a blood test or whatever test it is that you have to do for glandular fever. And they eventually came around and they were like, okay, fine, we'll do it. Like, just to shut me up more than anything. And then it came out that I did have glandular fever. And I remember then I was like, I didn't say anything to the doctor, but in my head I was like, do you know what I mean? You're an idiot. Like, I'm telling you this and you're not taking me seriously. But then I think back on it now, I'm like, he's probably seen, like, he's overworked. He's probably seen like 100 patients that day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I bet every single one of them's coming in telling him they've got like stage 4 cancer, when the majority of the time it's probably just a headache. And he's probably thinking, do you know what I mean? The chances are it probably was just a flu.
Yeah.
And then this one case he's wrong, and then it makes him look in my eyes like a bad doctor. And I feel, but yeah, any other person in any other walk of life, when they make a mistake, you kind of, it's water off a duck's back. It's not really that serious, but obviously with medical, in the medical world, like, a mistake can be like massively serious. And do you guys this might sound like a silly question, because obviously you work in the health sector, but do you guys have like a mental health support system or like safety net for you guys, so that like if you're going through like a kind of a tormenting period, you can like, there's someone who you can talk to, or whoever it may be?
So we have PMAs in midwifery,
right,
which are professional midwifery advocates, who are like people that have been specially trained, who are generally midwives. That I think every unit should have like an assigned PMA, who you go to if you're going through kind of like an investigation, or if you're struggling at work, or anything really. If you're going through anything kind of personal that's affecting you at work and you need to speak to somebody, then you can speak to them. Medicine wise, doctors, I really don't know. Going back to your point though, I completely agree, because I think as a midwife, we escalate to doctors, we escalate to our obstetricians, whereas as a doctor, you are where you're being, especially the consultants, like, that you can't escalate any further. It's on you. So yeah, I know, like, Grace Mussel's just qualified as a doctor, and I'm in awe of her, because I don't know how anyone could do it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it depends in where you work and what your management's like and how well these kind of PMAs are implemented. But I think generally there's support there if you need it. But I do think a lot of the time, especially when you have friends at work, I suppose you get a lot of your kind of support from your friends. It's like, because they understand, they've been there, they've been in similar situations. So for me, I would always kind of talk to the girls at work and kind of just bounce off them really with problems, or if I felt like I needed any support with anything. But there is stuff in place. I've personally never had to use those, but I think, yeah, there is stuff in place.
We've spoken about the great kind of the great moments, like obviously you get to see these, like you get to help bring a child into this world. You get
Yeah.
really thankful patients who are like thanking you, and obviously that makes you feel great. And
Yeah.
but like, have you ever experienced like, you know, the kind of the worst case scenario, like a stillbirth, or you know, I don't know, a child is born and then kind of in the next couple of days passes away for whatever reason? Like, have you dealt with that? And if so, like, what the hell is that like?
I think most midwives have dealt with of still with have dealt with stillbirth in some kind of sense. So I think whether that's actually looking after them during the birth of the baby, or whether it's kind of postnatally, or at some point of their journey, I imagine most midwives will have come across it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I have, and I've not been too closely involved in it, as in looking after them during labour or the actual birth of the baby, but it's really difficult, and I think different situations stick with you more than others, and I think there's
Right.
midwives that have been midwives for 30, 40 years will be able to look back on certain situations and remember everything, remember the baby's name, the woman's name,
Mm-hmm.
because naturally some things do stick with you and affect you more than others. And yeah, I know that it's not always the stillbirths and those kind of awful outcomes that stick with you. There can be other kind of really, really traumatic events where actually it's not been as terrible as that of an outcome, but it might just be I don't know, a really, I don't know, like a really difficult situation or an emergency that they can affect you as well. So it's not just, I think there's kind of a perception that it's just those outcomes that can be quite traumatic for the staff, but there's such a range of different things that can be hard to deal with. But
Mm.
yeah.
I, you know, there's shows like 24 Hours in A&E and these types of shows, and the ones that you'd always show me when we were at sixth form, which was it A Baby Born Every Minute or something?
One born every minute.
Yeah. But like these types of shows, like they kind of give like the general public like an idea of what it is to work in those institutions
But they,
daily, and like especially like the 24 Hours in A&E one, because that's just like chaos after chaos after
yeah,
chaos, tragedy after tragedy. And like you, like me as a person watching that, I just can't help but like tear up at almost
yeah,
every single, even if it ends up in the end semi well, I still like
yeah.
just think that whole ordeal is just horrific. But
Mhm.
it strikes me that like obviously like the doctor or the surgeon or the nurses or whoever, they can't have that approach, because like the last thing you want to do with your arm half hanging off is then come into A&E and like, oh my god, that is terrible, and like start crying, look at this, look at his arm, like you don't want that, do you know what I mean? And but
Yeah.
like with that said, so obviously I think it's part of the job is like you almost have to calcify a little bit and become a bit hardened to like what the normal person would probably freak out at or get very emotional over.
Mm.
But so even though it's part of the job and I guess almost necessary for you to kind of to move on with your day to day and not like get, you know, hung up on one scenario that doesn't allow you then to function with the next couple that's coming in that day, do you ever worry that like it's almost hardening you too much, like you're kind of losing that like sense of humanity, that thing
Um,
that first brought you to midwifery in the first place? Because like for people who don't know, like you used to show me the most like gory videos of One Born Every Minute, but like
right.
you would like
When Seb says, just for everybody listening, when Seb says I'm show him gory videos, they were not gory videos. It was like a baby just being like a beautiful, normal delivery, a baby being born. Seb was like a child and can't watch anything like that because he freaks
nah,
out. Like
it's when they come out. It's when they come out blue that scares me. But like, what I'm saying is, like, I would watch it and I'd be like, oh, even if it was a good one, I'd be like, oh, like it just because I'm not
You,
used to seeing that.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? That's just
yeah,
such
yeah,
a
yeah.
weird thing to see. But like, you would like look at it and be like, oh my god, Steph, it's so beautiful. Like your face would literally like light up when you would see this stuff. And I couldn't like compute. Like I understand that the process is beautiful, but to me, the actual
Yeah.
imagery itself was almost like horrific. But so are you worried that like through going through this process, like you're 3 years in now, you're fairly experienced, are you worried that like you're losing kind of that love for it that you had when you would show me those videos, for example? Because now that must be normal to you, like seeing those situations.
No, I still love it. I think if you ever get to the point when you're completely dissociated, and not that you don't care, but if you just kind of are so detached from it, I think that's probably the point when you have to kind of leave, because you have to care. That's the whole part of the job. If you don't care, then why are you doing it? If you can't give that woman that care that she deserves, then you're in the wrong job. So no, I think as you become more experienced and you get used to seeing certain things, you learn how to deal with them better. I don't see it as becoming detached from it in a bad way at the point I'm at anyway. But I think there probably is people that have got to that point, but I think if that is the case, then they should really leave. I don't feel like I work with anybody who's kind of too detached and in a bad way. But you know what you say about it makes it like you cry at stuff.
Yeah.
When I watch deliveries on when I watch births on One Born Every Minute, I'll always cry on the telly. Even now, like obviously delivered however many babies that like of my own. Not actually personally my own babies, obviously. Looked after
working on the team.
Babies. Yeah. It still makes me cry when like the music comes on and it's all like airy fairy on the telly. I start tearing up, and I'm like, I never tear up like actually physically looking after anybody else. Yeah, but I think it's because when you're in the moment, it's just like game face. You've got that responsibility. You're the one in that room looking after that woman. You just I don't know. Because you've got that pressure and that responsibility on you, and you're in the zone. You don't kind of allow yourself to feel those emotions, but I still, if I watch anything on the telly like that, it still makes me cry.
Like, do you think that being like a nurse or midwife has made you, how can I put this? I don't want to say a better person, but like, yeah, like, do you think it has? Like, I can't imagine that you go through what you go through on a daily basis, where you care for people on a daily basis, where it hasn't made you like more empathetic than like maybe like your other friends. Like, you know, we all have friends in common, me and you, and I would put you up there but I feel like obviously yes, because you've chosen this job, so it makes sense that you're really empathetic. But I feel like you've become even more so with like time as time's gone on.
I think I'm better at communicating, for sure. I think potentially, yeah, maybe more empathetic. I don't really know. I like to think, yeah, I probably have become a better person. I do think you have so many skills in midwifery that you have to kind of like draw on. Yeah, I think so. I think I've definitely grown as a person. Yeah, and like if I work with students, sometimes like like last week or something, a woman was crying with me, and she said, "Oh, how did you know what to say to her? Like I wouldn't have known what to say to her when she was crying." And like you don't, I didn't, you don't. It's things that you do every day that you think I don't know. I don't. You just that's just the job, and you get used to doing stuff like that and empathizing and communicating and listening. And I don't know. Yeah, I think I have definitely grown as a person.
Does it take an emotional toll on you? Like the fact that you said there, like, oh yeah, this woman was just crying with me, and like I just blah blah, and the student was like, oh, I can't believe, like the fact that that's your day to day, like, oh yeah, a woman was just crying with me about whatever it may have been, and like you don't see that as like if like some woman was like crying to me tomorrow, I'd be like, what is happening? Do you know what I mean? Because obviously, like in my day to day, that is like the furthest thing from normality. Like that must take some level of like emotional toll on you, surely. Like when you come home. Like, do you not like, I don't know, like call Brad or your mum or, do you know what I mean? Like, fuck.
It depends. I think different, because like, birth is emotional.
Yeah.
And pregnancy is emotional. After the postnatal period is emotional. Like the hormonal changes that women go through, women are bound to cry. Like we have women that cry all the time. So I think I'm just used to it, to be honest. So no, I don't think it does take an emotional toll. I think obviously certain situations, yeah, it would take more of a toll than others.
Right.
But because I've experienced it so much, which it's just the day-to-day for a midwife, to be honest.
So then, with that being said, then, like, coming back to it, if your day-to-day is like, for example, dealing with these women who are crying and this, that, and the other, and like you said,
not all the time.
not all the time, but like it's a normal thing for you. Like, it's not like out of the norm for it to happen. Yeah. So with that, if that's the case, right, and you're like saying like you just get used to it, and like you don't let it take an emotional toll on you, because otherwise you'd be a wreck every day as well. How then does that translate, for example, like when a friend of yours outside of work, obviously, is maybe confiding in you, and maybe they're going through a rough patch and they're like crying and they're really upset and this, that, and the other, like do you find yourself maybe like, do you find your patience maybe wearing thin, or like maybe you don't have as much sympathy as maybe you'd expect to have, because you've dealt with so much more extreme scenarios, and now like someone's crying to you because they've split up with their boyfriend, to you almost seems like a nonsense?
No, not at all.
So like you can switch between the two, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
Because I wouldn't be able to do that, I don't think. I feel like if I came but I feel like if I became hardened to it in my day-to-day life, do you know what I mean? If my work, like, it was kind of a normal thing. Oh yeah, I've had to just deal with Sue. Do you know what I mean? She was crying about blah blah, but whatever. Then I come home and then like a friend's crying to me about something. I think I find it hard to kind of change that microchip in my head and be like, this isn't work time now. Now I should like switch on my empathetic mode and like be real, like there and open for that friend.
I think when your friend's upset, I don't think you would ever. I mean, if you genuinely cared about your friend, I don't think you could ever be like that, to be honest. No matter what you do. Do you know? Yeah,
no, you're right. I just feel like because you deal with it on the day, like this is the thing, like your work is weird in that sense. Like for me, obviously, like if you called me up and you were really upset or you were like crying or whatever, obviously for me that's a moment, and it's a big moment. And like, but you might have dealt with that literally 10 times that day, and then I might call you up and be like, "Oh, me and Louise have just had a massive argument," and that's the 11th person to you in that 24-hour period who's like telling you shit, and you're like, oh, like I can't imagine how that. Like if that were me,
I mean, if I was trained, I would try and like put on a game face and still be nice to you, but afterwards I might think, Jesus Christ, that's me done for today.
That's my quota of upset people.
Yeah, that's it now. I'm not answering my phone.
Fair. But
I like to think I'd still be nice to you, even if I was kind of emotionally done. I'd like to think I'll still be nice, or at least put on a good front.
It would be quite jokes if I called you and you're just like, Seb, mate, I can't deal with your shit right now.
Yeah, we need tomorrow, mate.
That would be quite jokes. But nah, like it's I don't know, like I do respect it so much, but how does like what did like your close, like people who are real close to you, who see you on the day, obviously me and you we're close, but I don't get to see you as much as I would like, nor speak to you as much as I would like, but you know, someone like, you know, Brad, for example, or your mum, like how do they like, do they see a difference in you? Do you know what I mean? Like when you have hard days or a hard period, or?
To be honest, I think my mum would probably say that I've become quite good at just switching off, because when I first qualified, I feel like she would always say to me, "How was your day?" And we'd like have a good 20 minutes chat about my day. I walk in now and we're talking about any old random shite. We're talking about what's for tea, and we don't even mention work. So I think I'm just better at switching off and separating between work and home. I think you have to do that, otherwise if you take your work home every day, you'd just be a nightmare. Brad is probably used, like sometimes I tell Brad stories, or I'll like trying to explain like certain like conditions of pregnancy to Brad. I think Brad's probably thinking Jesus wept. He's probably sick of me talking to him about pregnancy and trying to explain stuff by now. He probably could actually like fill in for me as a midwife.
I'd love to see that.
I mean, he probably would disagree, but yeah, I think it's when I watch like Call the Midwife on the telly and I'm trying to like explain like certain things to mum. And she's like, all
right, we get it. You're a midwife. Shut up.
Yeah.
But You were talking about like how for you, obviously, it's normal. These women, their hormones are up and down all over the shop, and like you're having to deal with them as well as like the actual pregnancy itself, and this, that, and the other. What's the case with the dads? Like, have you
Um,
noticed the change, or have you like what? Do you know what I mean? Because obviously, pregnancy is massively. We always just think about the woman, and we always
yeah,
think about the child. And actually, there was my friend Rosie. We spoke about. I think it's the first podcast we ever did, and she did a documentary piece about like basically men who, because of the way society kind of thinks about pregnancy and that whole kind of situation, they felt massively kind of outcast, even though they're the father and they want to be
yeah,
involved. Like the focus is all on the woman. Whenever they go to work, it's like, oh, do you know what I mean? How's Gemma? They're never asking like, how's he doing? When the
yeah.
baby's born, it's all about the baby and the mother, and like, oh, breastfeeding and this, that, and the other. And they almost feel like this just like this kind of outsider looking in, to the part
Mm,
where like a lot of them have dealt with like serious depression from that, and they kind of now have, some of them have created like little father groups where these fathers bring in all their newborns and that they become their own support system. But yeah, how, like, obviously as you're the professional, like and
yeah.
you see it on the day to day, like how do you see that?
I often find that men process things completely differently to women. And I
Mm.
think especially women that are in labour and when they're actually giving birth, you're in such you're often they've got pain relief, they are in pain a lot of the time, so they're kind of in the zone. Whereas the
Hmm.
men looking on, they're completely helpless a lot of the time. Men
Hmm.
are like, don't get me wrong, men are amazing with their partners 99% of the time, and they're amazing support. But I do think they do feel helpless because a lot of the time they've never seen their partners in any pain really at all,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden they're having to watch them go through labour, which can be like the most traumatic time of people's lives. So um, I think men process and experience labour completely differently to what women do, and especially in like emergencies for women that say have postpartum hemorrhages, which is where women basically bleed after childbirth.
Hmm.
Um, Men see everything, so men can see that blood loss, they see that trauma, they see the emergency buzzer go off, they see all of the people come into the room, and for them, they might be thinking that, oh my god, she's going to die.
Mm.
And I think men are they are in a very unique position during childbirth because they're not, for us, that's we see it every day. For the woman, she's
Mm.
actually going through it, she's the one in the pain, in the zone, whereas for the men, they're just onlookers a lot of the time. So I
Yeah.
completely understand why men would. I do understand completely why some men are traumatized by some experiences that they go through. But I do think we do really try. So if ever an emergency buzzer goes off, we always have a midwife that's kind of assigned to like speaking to the couple and saying like, this is what's happening. There's going to be people in here doing this, this, and this, and this is why we're doing it. So we do always try to like communicate, talk through what's happening. But yeah, I think it can be very traumatic for men, especially I suppose with COVID and not being able to come to antenatal appointments and feeling very like detached from the
Yeah, of
pregnancy.
course.
I think that's going to take a toll on men as well in a different kind of way.
Yeah, I never
Um,
even thought about that. I never thought, of
yeah,
course.
I
So,
like.
men haven't been able to attend really
So luckily
any
now
of
they
their stuff.
can. Luckily now they can, but there was a point in COVID where they couldn't attend any of the scans. So for people that wouldn't know, so essentially women have all women will have two routine scans during pregnancy. So they have a 12-week scan, which is like a dating scan to date the pregnancy, give them an estimated due date, and
Hmm.
they'll have an anomaly scan at 20 weeks, which is where you look at basically the major structures of baby, um, and check that baby looks healthy, and all of this major structures of baby look, whether they look normal or abnormal, etc. So
Hmm.
they're the two scans that all women will have in pregnancy, and then women will have regular antenatal appointments with a midwife to check up on them, etc. And there was a point in COVID where men couldn't come to any of them. So I think for the women and the men that was really difficult. For certain things can be really hard. So we have women that will be recommended to be induced, and for some women they get all of this information coming at them, and it's overwhelming. So I think when men aren't there, it can be really difficult because women don't have that second person that's been with them through the appointment, that's heard all the information that they've heard. And so a lot of the when this was happening, I like to kind of say to the women, if you want to ring your partner or get your partner on the phone or whatever, we can do, blah, blah, blah. But thankfully now, men are coming to the appointment, so I don't think they're going to feel like just a spare part. And like they don't really understand what's going on in the pregnancy, because it must have been really difficult.
Yeah.
Like some men won't have heard their baby's heartbeat until they're with the woman in labour, and just like little things like that, I think have been hard. But yeah, it's nice that women have got that support, especially for times when things aren't quite going as well, and the men are there to support
what would you say makes like a good support partner? So say like, you know, say Louisa's pregnant tomorrow, and I have to go through this whole kind of, you know, process with her. Like, so, obviously you've seen bad, I'm sure you've seen bad, good and indifferent. Like, what would you say is like the kind of would make a partner like a real good support system for their wife or their girlfriend going through this?
So I think for women and men, so not just the men, but for any women, so women that have never had babies before, I would always say do antenatal classes. So the NHS should offer routine antenatal classes, but if you feel like you don't have all the information that you need from those classes, I'd recommend private antenatal education, just because knowledge is power, and the more informed you are, the more empowered you are, the more you can kind of challenge what's happening to you in your pregnancy, if there's certain things that you want to do or you don't want to do. So men kind of making the effort to kind of learn about what's happening, and antenatal education for kind of birth is really good for men as well, because then at least they kind of are prepared for what's happening. So one of my friends at work, she's a midwife, obviously, she had a baby, but her and her partner both went to antenatal education just so that during labour he would be able to kind of understand what's happening, not worry about certain things, kind of if any procedures were to happen, he would kind of understand why we do it and what we're doing it for and things like that. So definitely if men kind of take an interest and kind of are keen to learn, so if women want to do hypnobirthing, I think it's important that the men kind of are involved in that and kind of help to facilitate that with the women. Just like little things, like men, I always say to the men, like, it's your job to make sure she keeps drinking, because we always say to women that like being in labour is like running a marathon, so you need to keep drinking, you need to keep giving your body some fuel and keep yourself well hydrated. So just like little things, like making sure that the woman has plenty of water, encouraging her to be kind of mobile and upright, and helping her get into good positions, making sure she's comfy, listening to her, lots of different things, but just being attentive, really. Like, men, it's amazing for us midwives when the men are really, really great help, because not that it means that we don't have to do our job. Of course, we still have to do our job, but it's just like having an extra pair of hands, really, sometimes, if the men are just amazing and so helpful. But yeah, I'd say just listening, being interested, being attentive, lots of different things, really. But I'd say majority of men are just naturally supportive, and you can really tell when like a couple love each other and the man can't do enough for them. So that's always nice to see.
Yeah, I can imagine. Does it, like, obviously you came into this thing, like this job, because you loved, you know, childbirth and all the rest of it and the whole process around it. Now it's your day-to-day job. Like, do you look forward to the day when you're like pregnant, or is it like almost like a busman's holiday? Like, you know.
Everyone always says to me, like, if I had a pound for every time a couple have said this to me, like, oh, does it put you off? Because like when the conversation comes up, like, have you had children? I'm like, no, maybe one day. And they say, oh, does it put you off?
Maybe. You definitely want kids. Why you say maybe one day?
I mean, I definitely do want kids. But I will say, like, no, it doesn't put me off. I can't wait. I think all of our midwives are amazing. I can't wait for one of them to look after me, because they're great. But no.
And this might sound like a real stupid, ignorant question, right? But do you think it will like take the shine off it in some way? Just because you know, like, the ins and outs, like, you know exactly what to expect, like, you know how the procedure's going to go, like, you know what the doctors or the midwives are going to tell you at certain stages. Whereas obviously for someone who's never had a baby, or someone who's not or maybe it's the second, whatever. It's obviously all new, and it's like the whole thing's new, not just the kid. Like everything's new. The first heartbeat. You've probably listened to, like, I know it's not your kid, but you've listened to like a million heartbeats by now. Do you like worry that it will like take the shine off it a tiny bit?
No, not at all. No, it makes me more excited for it.
Really?
Yeah, I think, oh, it's my turn. No, not at all. I think it's good, actually. Like I was saying before, I advise all women to kind of be as informed as possible about pregnancy and about birth, etc. So I think as a midwife, we are in a really like privileged position because we understand kind of a lot of the pregnancy and childbirth, kind of what's normal, what's not normal. So I do think we are in a very privileged position. But I can speak for a lot of midwives who I know have had babies who say that kind of we feel sometimes like we know too much because we can worry about kind of the outcomes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that because one of my favourite books, is back there somewhere, is called When Breath Becomes Air, and it's basically about, spoiler alert, anyone who hasn't like read it, go and buy it now and just mute me for the next like minute and a half. But basically, it's about like this. He's a surgeon, he's a brain surgeon, and then he actually ends up getting cancer himself. So then it's like and it's like a true story, but the tables are flipped, and all of a sudden he's, instead of being the consultant, he's now having to go to these consultancy meetings, and there's someone on the other side of the table telling him how the procedure is going to go, what the recovery rate is, blah blah blah. And like one of the kind of the key themes in it is like, how does he finds it really hard to be the patient, and because like he knows all of the process, and like you said, he almost knows too much, but in doing so, and like in becoming the patient, he kind of says that he becomes a better doctor because of it, because he now understands like the shoe is on when the shoe's on the other foot. Do you worry that when you're going through it, like you might be second guessing what the other midwives are telling you, because you'll be like, yeah, but what about this case, and what about, is it, do you know what I mean, blah, 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 like, or will you be happy to go with the flow like someone who hasn't gone through it? We probably just put our trust in the midwives. And we're like, well, look, they know their shit. Like, if they're saying it's this, it's going to be this. Whereas you might be in like, well, I remember this case and this case and this case where that didn't happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think it's really difficult. And I think, especially, I've spoke to midwives who have had babies, and we often say, like, what's it like when you're actually in labour? Like, do you find yourself... So a lot of women will be on CTGs in labour. So that's cardiotachograph. So that's essentially where we monitor baby's heart rate. So obviously when you're a woman in labour who's not medically trained, you don't really know how to interpret that. Whereas if you're a midwife who's in labour, you're looking at your baby's heart rate, and I suppose I don't know whether some midwives will be in a position to kind of interpret it. But I've asked midwives who have had babies and said, like, do you find yourself looking at the CTG? Do you find yourself like worried about stuff? And 9 times out of 10 they say no, because you're not in a position to, because you're in pain. You're the one that's kind of. I think you do just place. I like to think that you would just place your trust in the midwife who's looking after you, and kind of embrace that you're not there as that role. You are the woman, and there's people that are there to look after you, and you need to trust that they're going to look after you. So I don't think I would. I think I would trust people to take care of me, and so hopefully not. Hopefully I won't be a terrible patient. And
well, you know, when it happens, whenever mine and Louisa times come, you're getting flown out to Madrid.
I'll do antenatal classes over FaceTime with you.
Nah, not FaceTime. I'm gonna we'll buy a new house, we'll get a separate room, mate, and you're coming out here for the 9 months, mate. You can do a stint in Spain, mate, and you can be like a Spanish English nurse. There's enough English people out here for you to help. So
can you imagine? I would be like talking to you guys. I wouldn't be having a clue what everybody else was saying.
Oh, I'd love to see hola, Louisa, tiene bebe y están tinta. I'd absolutely love to watch you. I'd love to watch you try and like just converse with the Spanish nurses. It'd be absolutely brilliant.
I'd be like speaking to you saying, Seb, like, you need to tell them this, and you'd be like, blah, blah, blah.
Nah, it'd be great stuff. It'd be great stuff. But I'm so glad that we obviously we talk regularly, but I'm glad that we got to have this particular conversation. It wasn't too bad, was it?
No, it was fine. It was fine.
Told you.
I suppose when you talk about what you know, you can talk all day, can't you?
There you go. And when you've got an amazing host like me, it just puts you at ease, doesn't it, really?
Well then, wow, I'm used to that bloody voice.
There we
I've
go.
heard so much of it over the years.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Grace. I really, really appreciate it.
That's okay, my darling. I hope I've not bored everybody with with
Not
all
at
of the
all.
mystery stuff.
Not at all. Everyone loves Gracie now. You've gone into everyone's hearts. This is what happens on the Earthly Lights podcast. We bear the soul, Grace, and by doing that, people share their souls with us. You know what I mean? It's just a beautiful thing. And all jokes aside, I really appreciate you and people in your line of work. I don't think you get enough props for it, and I think only when shit hits the fan do we really realize how like needed you guys are. So yeah, for anyone who's listening who maybe has a friend or a family member or anyone who's in a similar line of work or just like in a public service, like whatever it may be, a teacher or something like that, where they don't really get the kudos that they deserve, just send them a message. If you listen to this podcast, send them a message, let them know that they're appreciated, because without them, society would be a lot worse off. But yeah, with that rallying cry, I bid you all farewell, and thank you so much, Gracie. Love you.
Thank you, Seb. Love you.
Hi, guys. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. Every review helps us climb the podcast charts so that even more of you can listen to our amazing guests. We really appreciate the support. Remember to tune in next week. But until then, keep safe and have a good one.